and the world. Compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom and powered by DemeraraWaves.com.
The news comes to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories. With the news at this time, I am Tiana Jordan. A very good morning to you. First, the lead stories. City Council workers are getting a 10% pay hike. The People's National Congress reforms concerns about the management of the coronavirus pandemic have been dismissed. And in regional news, the payment of severance to ex-Liat pilots and other workers is tied up in Barbados's upcoming general election. And for the international news, we'll bring to you the latest bulletin from the BBC World Service. The details of these and other stories will be coming up right here in just a moment.
A COVID-19 PCR test is now mandatory for many routine activities, including travel and return to work purposes. At Eureka, our trained and experienced staff will ensure confidentiality while your test is conducted in a professional and timely manner, with results in just 48 hours. So the next time you require an efficient and hassle-free PCR COVID-19 test, call 624-8378, 608-8378, or 623-7233 to schedule your appointment. You can also ask about our house call testing service.
And now the news in detail. The more than 600 workers of the Georgetown City Council will get a 10% increase in wages and salaries. City Mayor Ubraj Narain says 5% will be retroactive to January 1st, 2021, and there will be an additional 5% from January 2022. He says the council is relying on raking in millions of dollars in outstanding rates and taxes to pay the salary increases. The mayor shies away from saying whether rates and taxes will be increased.
Well, that is a council has to deliberate on such matter. We'll wait on the council. The finance committee has to advise us on the way forward on those things.
He says that city council workers had not received salary increases since 2018. ExxonMobil says it made 2 oil discoveries at Fangtooth 1 and Lau Lau 1 in the Stabroek Block offshore Guyana. The Fangtooth 1 well encountered approximately 164 feet of high-quality oil-bearing sandstone reservoirs. The well was drilled in 6,030 feet of water and is located approximately 11 miles northwest of the Liza field. The Lau Lau 1 well encountered approximately 315 feet of high-quality hydrocarbon-bearing sandstone reservoirs. The well was drilled in 4,793 feet of water and is located approximately 42 miles southeast of the Liza field. President of ExxonMobil Guyana, Alistair Rutledge, says that the discoveries are a testimony of its technology and experience.
We've been exploring offshore Guyana. To achieve that amount is quite outstanding. We tend to forget this is still a frontier exploration region, so the success rate we're having really talks to the technology that we're able to bring, the experience from similar basins around the world. This is not normal, this level of success, and we remain committed to our exploration activities offshore Guyana. And hope to continue to extend and grow that resource base.
ExxonMobil says these discoveries will add to the previously announced recoverable resource estimate for the block of 10 billion oil-equivalent barrels. Meanwhile, President Irfan Ali is welcoming these 2 latest oil discoveries.
I'm very happy with every additional find that Guyana make because it adds to our total base and it adds to our ability in advancing the prosperity of our population and also improving our prospect of securing a prosperous future even for future generation of Guyanese.
President Irfan Ali. President Irfan Ali says the government is exploring the possibility of home testing for COVID-19 as Guyanese continue to flock testing sites.
A part of exploring is exploring the costs associated and to see supply, because there are still issues in the supply chain, to see our local capacity. And that is what we're analyzing now in terms of the home testing. But definitely it is something that is being discussed, because we know, based on what we are reading and what is happening, that the need for testing will increase. Naturally, people are going to become concerned with the slightest of symptom, and they're going to want to be tested, so that would increase.
Within the past 24 hours, 785 persons have tested for the virus, making it the highest number per day since the pandemic began in 2019. Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony is appealing to Guyanese not to rush to testing sites because they believe that they have been in contact with someone who has COVID. The opposition People's National Congress Reform, PNCR, is raising a range of concerns, including a lack of information about the variants of the coronavirus COVID-19 in Guyana. However, Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony says all the available evidence points to the presence of the highly contagious Omicron variant.
With Omicron, one of the PCR tests that is normally done, it targets 3 specific areas of the virus, and one of the areas is called an S gene. And if you see an S gene drop off, it is a proxy indicator that it might be Omicron. You'll have, of course, to be sure, you have to confirm that with genetic sequencing, which we are also pursuing. But in the light of the epidemiological evidence and what we have seen with the S gene drop off, we are pretty sure that we have Omicron here. So that's not, I don't think that there's much debate there.
President Irfan Ali also dismissed concerns by the PNCR that a number of the testing sites have been shut down. He says there are sufficient kits. The PNCR berated the government for a lack of information about the pandemic in Guyana, including epidemiological data to confirm the variants in Guyana. But the health minister said the Delta variant was still the dominant variant here, but from the look of things, the Omicron variant would eventually be the most prevalent here. Even as Guyana awaits gene sequencing results due in 2 weeks to confirm which variant is here, Dr. Anthony says that local, regional, and international evidence is pointing to strong indicators that the Omicron variant is in Guyana.
In terms of the PNC saying that we don't have data to manage this epidemic, that's not true. Every single day, we have a team of persons that meet. This include each one of the regional health officers and all the respective heads, whether of hospitals and persons dealing with testing, all the key players that are helping with the management of this disease. They meet every morning at 7:30. They go through all the data relating to COVID, and based on the information that we are getting, they strategize for the rest of the day and going into the near future. So we are very sure with what we are doing, and it's data-driven and it's science-driven.
Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony. And now in regional news, the Leeward Islands Pilots Association, LIALPA, is again lamenting the failure by shareholder governments to pay them their severance. LIALPA wants Barbados to summon a meeting among shareholder governments to pay severance to the terminated employees. Chairman of LIALPA, Patterson Thompson, says his union continues to wait on the Barbados government to send letters to discuss the plight of workers who have been on the breadline for the past 21 months. More from Barbados Today's Emmanuel Joseph.
Thompson acknowledged that general elections slated for January the 19th in Barbados will now further delay any chances of talks being held to conclude a plan to pay the struggling ex-LIAT employees their legal entitlements.
But we are still struggling. All the LIAT workers are 21 months into having no severance at all, no end in sight to the plight. And it's a very difficult time to live. We are struggling. We have no money to retool. We have no money to pay bills. There is no job on the horizon for us. So we are 3 times over worse than most people.
Thompson said the offer of a compassionate payment of half of the severance made by the Antigua government and the advance of $2,000 per month by the Barbados government to its nationals have not gone far enough to satisfy the dire financial problems of the workers.
The 2 initiatives from the Barbados government and Antigua government do not deal with it conclusively. They do not deal with the situation long term. And we need help. Not only do we need help, we also would like to know what about the future of aviation in the Caribbean. What about, they see other airlines operating within Barbados airspace now, within Barbados, home port in Barbados. That's fantastic, it's good for them. But what about the Barbadians and the other CARICOM nationals who lived in Barbados, who work for them? What about their future? Has there anything been discussed with other airlines to try and absorb some of us into that workforce? Can that happen? I understand they would have their people, but obviously everything is a negotiation.
Hundreds of former LIAT employees are owed about 80 million EC dollars, that's 30 million US dollars in severance payments. Emmanuel Joseph for Barbados Today.
And Trinidad and Tobago is preparing to purchase the pediatric version of the Pfizer vaccine. TTT News Online also reports that there are more pediatric COVID cases.
The Ministry of Health has already placed an order for the pediatric version of the Pfizer vaccine and will get supplies once it is approved for use by the WHO. Health Minister Terence Dial Singh said if approved, the pediatric version would be different to the current stock of Pfizer that is in this country.
Have to wait for the EUL or EUA approval for the pediatric version, where the dose is different, the buffer is different, the packaging is different. What I can tell you and tell the country is that we have not been standing still on this issue. We have already placed orders for the pediatric version.
Meanwhile, Chief Medical Officer Dr. Roshan Parasram said there has been a slight uptick in pediatric cases at hospital and they will continue to monitor those numbers.
What we have noticed over the last few days, we actually have 8 pediatric cases in hospital today. One of them is critically ill in ICU. So we note it as a concern on the back of Omicron and looking on as what is happening in the rest of the world. The pediatric cases are filling up the hospitals in the US, for example.
Trinidad and Tobago's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Roshan Parasram, ending that report from TTT News Online. Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro was discharged from hospital on Wednesday, 2 days after being admitted with an intestinal obstruction. This is his latest health complication from a 2018 stabbing. Bolsonaro's doctor, Antonio Macedo, told reporters that the president is recovered and ready to work. He adds that the Brazilian leader will be on a special diet during the weekend and will not be able to perform vigorous physical activities. Bolsonaro, who had been in power since 2019 and plans to stand for re-election in a presidential vote scheduled for October, said he will maintain his regular agenda, including a trip to Russia in February. He was vacationing in the southern Brazilian state of Santa Catarina when he was urgently taken to Sao Paulo's Vila Nova Star Hospital in the early hours of Monday after suffering from abdominal pain. Doctors inserted a nasogastric tube and even considered surgery, but the obstruction was cleared on Tuesday. A medical bulletin issued on Tuesday evening said the president's digestive tract was showing signs of recovery. that he was doing well on a liquid diet and that doctors had removed the nasogastric tube. Bolsonaro had undergone a series of emergency surgeries since being knifed during a campaign event in September 2018. And now for the international news, the latest bulletin from the BBC World Service.
BBC News. Hello, this is Jerry Smith. Police in Kazakhstan's main city, Almaty, say they killed dozens of anti-government demonstrators who tried to storm government buildings overnight. A police spokesman blamed what he called terrorist gangs. Our Central Asia correspondent, Rehan Dimitri, says some footage is emerging despite the internet being down.
The latest is the footage that we've seen about what looked like a military operation in the streets of Almaty with armored vehicles and military personnel on the ground. Some bits of information are emerging on social media, video clips that are almost impossible to independently verify, but it does show what appears to be protesters taking over one of the police stations in Almaty and a number of policemen walking out of the station with their hands up. And it showed that some of the protesters were definitely armed.
The anti-government unrest, initially sparked by a sharp rise in fuel prices, has spread to several cities. The Kazakh Health Ministry says more than 1,000 people have been injured across the country. Troops have been sent from a Russian-led military alliance. A court hearing in Australia on whether the world #1 men's tennis player Novak Djokovic should be deported has been adjourned until Monday. His lawyers had challenged the decision to deny him entry. Australian border officials said Djokovic failed to provide adequate proof he was medically exempt from the requirement for visitors to be double vaccinated against COVID. There's been widespread anger in Australia, which has had some of the world's tightest restrictions. Stephen Parnis, an emergency doctor in Melbourne, says he understands why people are angry.
More than 90% of Australians who are eligible for vaccination have had it. And that's one of the reasons why our fatalities due to COVID are so low compared to the rest of the world. So this is something very few of us are prepared to compromise on, whether you are an ordinary bloke in the street or the #1 tennis player in the world.
North Korea is celebrating what it says was the successful test of a hypersonic missile on Wednesday, which the North Korean authorities said was an important part of its military modernization plan. More from Celia Hatton.
North Korea's military says this launch tested the flight control and stability of its new hypersonic missile to its great satisfaction. The weapon landed in the sea between the Korean peninsula and Japan, leading to swift condemnation from Seoul and Tokyo. North Korea claimed to have tested a hypersonic missile for the first time in September. The advanced weapons are faster and more maneuverable than conventional missiles and could pose a challenge to existing missile defense systems. North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un, pledged last week to continue to build up Pyongyang's military capabilities.
World News from the BBC. A hospital chief in the Chinese city of Xi'an has been suspended after staff refused to treat a woman who was 8 months pregnant because her COVID test was out of date. She later miscarried. Widely shared video on social media shows the woman sitting outside the hospital gates in a pool of blood, prompting unusually direct criticism of the authorities. The 13 million residents of Xi'an have been in lockdown for 2 weeks. Several election rallies in India have been cancelled amid a surge of coronavirus infections. There's been widespread criticism of the governing BJP for allowing campaigning to continue. As the US Congress prepares to mark the first anniversary of the deadly attack by supporters of Donald Trump, the Attorney General has promised to hold all those involved to account. Merrick Garland said there could not be different rules for the powerful and powerless. The Democratic Party Congressman Lou Correa was among members of Congress trapped in the Capitol attack.
I live it every day. A year ago, I thought I was in the safest place in the world, the United States Capitol. Nothing could happen to us there. And of course, for a few hours there, I thought for sure my life was going to end. I was surrounded by Democrats and Republicans who were gripped in sheer terror, crying, trying to figure out how they were going to survive. I personally was prepared to do battle. I thought that was the end of my life.
Regulators in France have imposed large fines on Facebook and Google over obstacles to letting users opt out of cookies that track their data. They've fined Facebook $67 million and Google nearly $170 million for breaches that also involve its YouTube subsidiary. The regulators have given the companies 3 months to make it as easy for customers in France to opt out of cookies as it is to accept them. BBC News.
The news came to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories.
Don't let the fear of contracting the coronavirus disease deter you from seeking the medical care you need. At Eureka Labs, we ensure the safety of our clients and staff with our rigid sanitization routine. This involves the use of ultraviolet lights to effectively rid the air and all surfaces of viruses and bacteria that may be present throughout the lab daily. The light works to rapidly inactivate microorganisms through a physical process that is invisible to human eye. So the next time you need a checkup, don't hesitate to give us a call on 225-7574 to schedule your appointment.
And now to end the news, here is a recap of the leads. City Council workers are getting a 10% pay hike. The People's National Congress reforms concerns about the management of the coronavirus pandemic have been dismissed. And in regional news, the payment of severance to ex-Liat pilots and other workers is tied up in Barbados's upcoming general election. And that's the end of the news.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio Newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.